Hi guys, it's Erica here, and author of First Dollar Feeling, available now on Amazon. And on this episode of First Dollar Friday, we are talking about bootstrapping your business. So, if you don't know what bootstrapping is the term that we use in the entrepreneurial world to describe somebody that builds their business without outside funding, like a bank loan or venture capital or other investors, things like that. So you're funding either by the business money that the business is making itself, or you're financing it through your own personal means. So we refer to that as bootstrapping. A lot of small business owners start out doing that because either they're not able to get a conventional loan, or they don't even know where to begin to find an investor or venture capital, because that whole process takes forever. I'm not gonna lie. You'd be surprised to hear how many big companies that we have today started out as bootstrapped, just in your garage, just doing what you got to do to get it done type of companies. We've got Dell, GoPro, Apple, Facebook. We all heard Facebook started in a Harvard dorm, right? Microsoft started in a garage. Same thing with Apple. Clorox, Coca-Cola, Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, eBay. So a lot of the companies that we see today, and there are thousands of others that we could go on and on about, that were self-funded, where the owners or the developers or the inventor had an idea, built the product, and then either funded it themselves or built the business based on revenue that the original product was making. And then it grew from there. So there's a lot of different options when you're bootstrapping. In First Dollar Feeling, I talk a lot about understanding and establishing what your goals for your own business are. Some people want to scale and be the next Bill Gates, be the next Microsoft, be the next Apple. Some businesses just want to create a sustainable income for themselves and their employees. That doesn't really require you to scale on millions and billions of dollars in your first 5 years, right? So if your goal is starting small, bootstrapping can be a good option for you. If your goal is scaling to a massive scale, bootstrapping may be a good option for you. You have a couple different options as far as what you can do from that starting point. You just have to keep that goal in mind as you're moving forward. All right. So now that we know what bootstrapping is and a few companies that have done it successfully, I should mention my company and all of my ventures have been bootstrapped as well. So I speak from experience here. A few benefits: it's cheap to get started. So we've all heard the adage, it takes money you have to spend money to make money. That is true. But when you're bootstrapping, you have way more control over getting started. The great thing about the digital economy right now is that it's easier than ever for people to start a business. If you have an invention, if you have an idea, if you have a service, you can just go create a website and a Facebook page, get a business license, and off you go. That wasn't necessarily the case 20, 30 years ago. So today it is a lot cheaper to start a business in many industries, not everyone. There are some instances where if you're not a developer and you want to create some kind of software, like building a software platform can cost north of $250,000 or more. Or if you're trying to mass produce a product, that gets very expensive. So there's a few industries where this becomes a little bit more challenging. For service-based industries, it's a lot easier to start out on the bootstrapping option. It's a lot cheaper. You can kind of grow on your own as a solopreneur with very low overhead, without having to get outside capital. And then as you build up that revenue, you can start to add people, you can start to add products, you can start to add more offerings. So it's fairly cheap to get started if you know what you're doing. Another good benefit is that you have total control. So here's the thing: the actual ownership of the business, for everyone who sits there and says, I'm an entrepreneur, but I have, X amount of funding from venture capital, that was usually earned by giving up some of your equity. And equity means ownership in your business, which means you do not have the total say. The ownership of the business really lies with who has brought in the most money. That's the person who's going to sit there and probably call most of the shots. So if you are wanting to be the leader in your business, if you want to do this on your own, if you don't want to have a whole lot of outside input. And I'm not saying that mentorship and outside input is bad. However, when it comes down to making the choices, if you know where you're going and you know why you want to be different, it can be extremely hard when you have an investor who is pushing on you to say, I just spent $200,000 with your business. I'm saying, no, you can't do this thing that is really going to differentiate you, because they can't fully see your vision. I've seen that happen multiple times before. You lose part of your voice in your own business. When you're bootstrapping, you are the voice in your business. You get to call the shots every single step in the way, which can be a good or bad thing. But I know for me, that was a big thing for me, was that I knew why we were different. I knew why my agency was going to approach things differently. I was good with growing slow, so long as we grew according to our core values and our mission. So the thought of bringing on an outside investor who would shift that focus just wasn't an option for me. So you get to have total control, you get to call the shots, and you can decide when you want to go out and get mentorship, get support from outside areas where they don't have a say in the bottom line of your business. Another benefit is that you get to focus on actually building the business and not raising capital. So at the beginning, I mentioned that the process of getting venture capital, the process of gaining investors, the process of handling loans and all of that, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort. We've all seen those, people in the magazines and on TV and on the news, these unicorns that go out and they spend all of their time raising money to build a business rather than building the business itself. There have been entrepreneurs that go out and all they've done is sell the idea and raise a whole bunch of money and nothing ever comes out of it because they were raising money and not building the business. That's not true every case. A lot of people are able to actually see their product to fruition after raising the capital. But when you're bootstrapping, the process is slow by nature. You grow as the money comes in. So you spend a lot of your time both raising money through generating revenue and building your product, fine-tuning it, doing the testing. All of that is happening all at the same time, which means by the time you're a lot more stable financially and the business is turning a profit, you are also, you are already miles ahead in the product and service development side of things. So you get to focus on building the business, not just raising capital. And then you have the freedom to learn. One of the big things is, again, when you have the overhead of either an investor who wants to see their return because that's their focus, they invested in you to see a return, or a bank who cares that they get paid every month for your loan, you make different decisions, right? You make decisions strictly on how much money you're bringing in. And there's a lot more to business than how much money you're bringing in. That is a huge part of your foundation. Obviously, if you're not making any money, you're going to go out of business, and that's not good. However, there are a lot of different things around that you should be focusing on as well that help to generate revenue. When you are walking into things with overhead or with an investor who wants their return as quickly as possible, you don't necessarily focus on that trial and error side of things, right? So that goes back to the being able to focus on building your business versus raising capital. So that's the benefit of bootstrapping. Let's talk about the cons, because there are just as many. And like I said, bootstrapping is not for everybody. So you want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into before you start down this path. So some disadvantages to bootstrapping. Your cash flow isn't stable. I know we went through this a lot with COVID in my agency, as we had to kind of restructure how we were doing things, and I had to go back to my team and says, if you're not bringing in money, everybody is on sales, everybody is generating revenue, everything that we do is tied to a specific stream of revenue, and I had to get really nitpicky about that to make sure that we were okay, that we were self-sufficient. That's a hard thing to do, and that's a hard conversation to have with your staff, is going, you're in a startup, so everybody is responsible for bringing in revenue. That adds a lot of additional consideration for people when you're building your business, because if you don't have the revenue to build, right, and you're not self-sustaining, you're just pouring more money in constantly. That's not good. So your cash flow isn't stable and you constantly have to watch it because you don't have that added cushion of either a loan, a line of credit, or investor funding. So the money that you bring in is all the money you have unless you start getting into your personal savings, and then that's a whole other conversation. If you decided that, hey, I can get the best of both worlds and I can bring in a partner to help, and they can bring in money and I can bring in money, and that gives us more money to start with and we can still bootstrap, that's great. Partnerships are difficult. It's like a business in of itself. It's just like a marriage. And we'll do another video on this in the near future. But you have to discuss equity and who has say in what and all of these other things. It's a lot like having an investor if the investor was at your business every single day. It can get really challenging really fast. So there is the possibility with bootstrapping, if you do it with a partnership, that you end up with equity issues, you end up with people bailing out before you're ready, and all these other things. So that's something to consider. Another disadvantage, the risk of failure is high, and your growth will be slower every time than somebody who has venture capital or a substantial line of credit that they're pulling from. I cannot go out and hire 5 people to staff my agency just like that. I have to take careful consideration in saying every single one of them has to be generating revenue in some way. They have to be bringing something in. So I can't hire as quickly as some of my competitors who do have that line of, who chose to go out that round of going the line of credit or having investors or having partners or something like that. If you're developing a product, you're putting in your own money and your resources are probably a lot less than somebody like the bank or a venture capitalist who's got a whole bunch of resources. So you're just kind of plugging along, and it's really hard when you're just kind of plugging along step by step by step by step. As you get more revenue, you kind of bridge forward a little bit, and there's some ebb and flow in that. But the risk of failure, the rates of failure for bootstrap business is very high. And when you do grow, you're going to grow slowly until you get to the point where if you decide to take out a line of credit or you decide to bring in an investor, then things tend to skyrocket. But it's a slow and steady process. So if you're not in for that, bootstrapping might not be best for you. Also, it's stressful. Running a business in any capacity, as we've discussed before, is stressful. But again, you're dealing with both your personal finances, and more than likely your income is completely tied to the business. You don't have a backup plan, all this other stuff. Like, that's a lot of strain to put on somebody on top of growing a business. So before you jump into bootstrapping, think about what that really means for you and your family, and understand that this is definitely can be a harder road to navigate than getting a line of credit or a venture capitalist money or an investor. So if you do decide to go down the road of bootstrapping, which for some people it works great. It's worked great for me. It's provided options that I wouldn't have had otherwise. My number one tip, know your cash flow. And this is true even if you had venture capital money. You need to know exactly where your money is coming in, exactly when it's coming out, and that you can cover your bills and that you're padding away for a rainy day. Every single month, we don't break even. I've always had my budget set so that we bring in more than I need. So there's always that cushion, and that cushion always goes to the business savings, so that when something like COVID hits, or if there's a drop, we lose a major client or something like that, there is money to cover that until we're able to get back on our feet. There are contingency plans in place, and there is money in the bank that the business has generated to be able to sustain that. So you want to make sure you have that covered. You also want to make sure that you have it be a family conversation. Like I said, you're tapping into your personal finances. Either way you cut it when you are bootstrapping your business. So you want to make sure that everybody, your spouse, or however your family situation is, that they're aware, and that they're on board, because you're going to have to make some hard decisions moving forward. And it does affect your personal finances, right? Like, it does affect your ability to pay the bills month to month, especially if this is your sole income. Another thing I recommend, and I did this and I recommend this for a lot of my employees, is start with a side hustle. So the great thing about awesome employees is that they often have dreams of their own. When I started out with my business, I actually went to my boss because I was working full-time at a tech company. And I said, look, I really want to do this. I want to branch out into marketing. This is something that I've been doing for a long time, and I really want to see where this goes. He supported it, said, so long as your work gets done, so long as you're still fulfilling your hours, things are being met, you're fine. And he appreciated me being honest with him and telling him what's going on. 6 months later, I had left that company because I was growing so fast that I had to go full-time in my own business. But that relationship was a very positive one because I was honest, because I had an employer who was willing to work with me on that and support that dream. I have a lot of employees on my staff that do the same thing, where they've got their own businesses that they do part-time, or they work for me part-time and they have their own business full-time, and I fully support that, and I'm always here to mentor them on things that they're doing. Not every employer is going to do that. So if you're doing this and your employer is supporting you doing it now, pay it forward to your own employees, because it does make a difference, right? Not everybody's going to stay with you for the entire life of your business, but if you make it a win-win with your staff, like your employer is willing to do with you, if that's the option you choose, make sure you're paying it forward, because it matters, especially if you're a woman in business. Like I cannot imagine being able to do the things that I did if I didn't have the support that I had. So make sure that you are being honest with your employer. Start out with the side hustle, test out the plan, and see how it goes before you start to make that your sole income, because that's a big, scary leap to make. Make yourself self-sufficient. So like I said, that goes back to the cash flow of making sure that what your business is bringing in is less than what it sends out as far as money goes. So that cash flow budget thing. And build yourself that way. Start saving the way you do with your personal savings. You're going to save for a vacation, or you're going to save to buy a new home, you're going to save to buy a car. Same thing. If you want to buy new equipment, you save for it, you make a budget for it, you start squirreling stuff away. Make yourself self-sufficient so that the money to pay for the business is coming from the business itself as quickly as possible. Another thing is your hiring. Your staffing. When you get to the point where you start hiring employees, you can either go the option of going with contractors, which works well. I started out doing that before I started hiring on with W-2s. But you want to make sure that you hire slow and you fire fast. Employees are expensive, right? And if you don't have the right ones in there, they're going to cost you more. So understanding exactly how much it costs to bring them in, being really rigid about the kind of people that you're looking for, and really not necessarily rigid, but really clear on who you're looking for, and making sure that your onboarding processes are there to help them succeed. And if they're not a good fit, let them go. Do not wait, because it's going to cost you more money. And if you're going to bootstrap, you gotta have that money right at the top of your mind. And then finally, if you do well and if you succeed and your business is self-sufficient, you're growing, and you're ready to take that next step, if scaling was your goal or becomes your goal, that's great. So then you can start looking into bank loans that that you already have the money in place to cover that monthly cost just out of the revenue that you're bringing in. Or an investor. If you're ready to expand and you're ready to take on an investor, just be prepared to give up some of that equity and some of that voice. But if you're getting over your head and you want to scale to the next option, sometimes that works really well. So know when it's time to go from bootstrapping to that next step of venture capital, of finding an investor, of getting a bank loan. And again, it boils down to what you're able to do in your business. If you can prove the product, if you can prove the service, if you can prove that it makes money, and you have enough in the bank to be able to handle things, if that other deal goes sideways, that's when you can start having the conversation about venture capital investment and bank loans. All right, so I go a lot more into bootstrapping and planning for your business and deciding whether to scale and all of that other fun stuff in First Dollar Feeling, which is available for sale on Amazon. Check it out, get the book. If you need help with cash flow, I will provide a link in our comments about a cash flow tool that I have on the website. It's free to download. You can figure out where you are, where you need to be, or if you're just starting out, it's a great way to kind of test the waters as far as creating a plan and a budget for yourself. So that's our conversation about bootstrapping. I will see you next Friday. Thank you.